ScreenFiles.com in review. What I'm looking at today is 2021's Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, directed by Dustin Daniel Credit. And it's pretty good. It's the story of Shang-Chi, who's the son of a powerful warlord who possesses these weapons, the Ten Rings, which enable him to live, I wouldn't say forever, definitely not if you've seen a movie, but certainly a lifespan many times greater than that of a normal human, as well as the ability to fight off entire armies virtually on his own. It's a good movie, as I said. Oh, by the way, 2 end-credit scenes. Stay to watch them. Sit through the credits, don't leave. In any case, as I was saying, it's a pretty good movie. It's a little flabby in the middle. It could be shorter, to be sure, but it's well acted, and it's pretty enjoyable to watch, though the messaging is a little odd, in the sense that there's a lot being made of people working hard to obtain whatever abilities they have. Yet there's an entire sequence of the movie where Awkwafina's character learns to shoot a bow and arrow expertly within seemingly hours. It's a really odd scene, doesn't make any sense narratively, and it was easily taken care of. How, you might ask? All that needed to be done was to make time work differently in this enchanted village. Kind of like Shangri-La, I don't recall. Ta Lo, I believe it's called. So let's say only days had passed since Shang-Chi and the other people escaped. His father could be years in Ta Lo. So at least, well, let's say not years, perhaps a year. But point being, it would help explain how she's so good with a bow. It would have just been so helpful to do, but they didn't do it. In any case, I don't think I'd like to see an actor as much as I'd like to see Ben Kingsley in this movie. When he turns up reprising his character from Iron Man 3, it just felt so good. Now, to be blunt, the Ben Kingsley you met in Iron Man 3 is not quite the Ben Kingsley you meet in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. He's certainly similar, but he's not the same man, which makes sense. Time passes and people change. Though, something about Ben Kingsley's portrayal just really warmed my heart. And sure, his character primarily exists to give information, but he is such a welcome sight. And speaking of that, by the way, there's this mythical creature that Kingsley keeps seeing. He thought he was just going nuts. It implies that other people can't see it? I'm not sure, being that Shang-Chi and his friends could see it. So that's a little odd. I would have liked to have seen that explored a little more. Kingsley's character says that he's essentially become the court jester for Shang-Chi's father. So I would have liked to have seen some of that, and to see this creature and see him respond to it. Give it a little background, so that way, as I said earlier, it doesn't feel like Kingsley is there just to give information, though he is such a great actor. And again, I don't know why I felt that way about seeing him, though I enjoyed seeing him so much. Supposedly, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is one of the cheaper Marvel movies, at $150 million. It is gorgeous. The effects are, I wouldn't say seamless, but they are very good. For instance, there are some scenes where Shang-Chi is reacting to a dragon. Mild spoiler there. But it looks so good. When he steps off the dragon, you don't, at least I didn't get that uncanny valley feel. oftentimes when people are writing things that aren't there, what tends to happen is that it somehow feels out of sync, sort of. This happens in most instances. Though in the case of Shang-Chi, it felt seamless. And in fact, for a lot of the scenes involving this dragon, looked so good that if, let's say, I didn't know dragons didn't exist, I could have been sold by this. It was really good. Was it Jurassic Park Tyrannosaurus Rex good? Hard to say. I think the dragon was a more outlandish character to create. Therefore, that makes it harder to do. So in its own way, I think it was as good. Now keep in mind, as far as I'm aware, no one built a giant dragon. So this thing just looked really solid, really there, which is a feat, frankly. When the movie moves away from Shang-Chi navigating the world or the village of Ta Lo and starts explaining things to you, it kind of loses momentum. But it picks up again relatively quickly. It's, again, a surprisingly engaging movie. And I've read in some places that a criticism was that the martial arts were overly CGI-ified. This is nonsense. There are instances where some of the martial arts are very Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is to say wire work, obvious wire work. Not that you can see the wires, but based upon the action of the performer. Though there's very little of that in Shang-Chi, and most of the martial arts are pretty obviously being fought, which looks really good. I wish that Daniel Destin Cretton had a better grasp of choreographing fights. It's not as weak as the effort in Captain Marvel, but it's not great either. In too many instances, there are cuts in scenes where the action shouldn't be allowed to play out. Switch the angle of the action, sure, but don't cut into something else. It got a little choppy, and I wish it hadn't done that. Though, as I said, as far as I'm aware, most of the action was not overly CGI assisted. So that's a good thing. Though there's a problem with Shang-Chi that continues through most of the Marvel movies. And that problem is namely, everything seems to have incredible larger-than-life stakes. This is a problem because it shouldn't always be. Though there's signs of hope that this is not something that will continue. For instance, if you look at Spider-Man Homecoming, Vulture was a thief. Relatively simple, not a big, massive, world-ending affair. Spider-Man Far From Home. Mysterio was a megalomaniac. Still not world-destroying stakes. He lied and created the impression that that was the case, but they weren't. And that's a really good thing. It seems to me, at any rate, that Marvel is slowly moving away from the world-ending, greatest disaster on Earth type of stakes. And this is something I think will save Marvel Studios. Now let's keep it real. Marvel Studios is not exactly threatened by any stretch of imagination. But the thing is, like with anything else, formulas become very rote and very routine. Marvel has to stop doing it. No, that's not actually true. Marvel has to do it less often. Have the stakes be based upon the character, so that some movies will, by definition, not be as big as others. For instance, Marvel's upcoming Moon Knight should not be as epic feeling as, let's say, the Infinity War movies. And that's not really fair, those are really high stakes. But it's the idea that most Marvel movies have this really big ending laser shooting in the sky, or in the case of Shang-Chi, mythical creatures and all sorts of stuff. It has to move away from the epic and start telling smaller stories. As I said, the Spider-Man movies are a good illustration of how this can work. But Marvel will be a prisoner to their formula till they stop doing it. So, let's say Daredevil, when he's going to be in a movie, and it's going to happen because Charlie Cox is awesome and needs to be Daredevil again. He doesn't need to fight these world-ending threats. It should not be that way. Keep the villains ground level. There's value in that. Because what it does is create contrast. It shows you that not everything in a world sense has the same stakes. That's not to say the stakes aren't high for the person involved. They're Daredevil, Spider-Man, or whoever. But they're not world-ending stakes. Most people's lives do not revolve around world-ending stakes. Thank God. And they shouldn't. And that needs to be reflected in Marvel Studios movies. And that makes sense because Marvel Comics was one of the first to introduce more realistic people and scenarios into their comics. And they need to extend that philosophy into their movies. Though, as I said, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, well worth catching. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace.